Okay, the topic for tonight is, does Hashem change his mind? I hope the answer that leaps to your consciousness spontaneously is, of course not. What a dumb question. But let me point out that there's at least room to ask the question. To make a request, to ask for something, you have to believe that your asking might affect the outcome. If you were sure that the person you're speaking to will pay no attention to your request, it would be absurd to make the request. You're wasting your time. To make a request means you have to believe that it's at least possible that your request could make the difference between getting it and not getting it. Well, the heart of prayer is making requests from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not only in the weekday Shemona Esrei is it the largest part of the weekday Shemona Esrei, but the purpose of coming before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in prayer is to ask for things. We start with praise to recognize, as far as is humanly possible, who He is and who we are and how we're related. And we sort of end with gratitude, because it's appropriate to express gratitude for things that you have received. But the reason you come is to request. Now, what are you doing when you request? Well, as we said, to make a request means to believe that whether I get it depends upon my request. If I ask, I'll get it. If I don't ask, I won't get it. So what am I asking for? If I'm silent, it means I'm not getting it. So what am I asking for? I'm asking, it sounds like, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should change his mind from having decided not to give it to me, and now to give it to me. If that's not what's going on, then we need an explanation of what's going on. Also, in the Chumash, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu expresses his perception of the degrading direction of the world leading towards the flood, and he says, Ki nichamti ki asisim, I nicham, that I made them, and some translations translate, I regret that I made them. Regret is definitely a change of mind. When I made them but thought they would have certain value, I thought they would have some purpose. To regret means I made a mistake before I thought they would have a purpose, and now they don't have a purpose, and that's definitely a change of mind. Of course, I'm now only citing some translations. Perhaps those translations are wrong. Then we have to understand what the right translation is. Now, I want to give background for the general idea that I want to apply here with some other cases which at the outset may look different, but I think they all have the same inherent structure. Let's take a very obvious one. Let's take reward and punishment. So, in particular, well, let's take tshuva. A person does a crime, a transgression, and there's a punishment for that. Okay, it varies with the person and the time and the background and the psychology. Taking that all into account is a judgment of the appropriate punishment. We're told that if a person does tshuva, there is no punishment. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva that tshuva is tris b'fnei paranius. It's a barrier in front of punishment. There's no punishment if you do tshuva. So what are you doing when you do tshuva? Person's committed a crime, and the decree of punishment applies to him and that crime, and then by doing tshuva, he changes that. And now there won't be any punishment. Indeed, the metaphor of a tris is like a barrier. So The person's here, he's done the crime, the punishment is there, there's an open space in between, and he puts up a barrier and stops it. Isn't that like changing the situation? He was subject to it, now he isn't anymore. So doesn't tshuva change the situation? And let me add one more example, which again may sound not exactly the same, but I think it has the same structure. Poor Uwe Schwartz, who lives in Chicago, and 4 blocks away from his home is a McDonald's. And Uwe Schwartz is about tshuva, and he has a history of really enjoying bacon cheeseburgers. He's resolved to become kosher. There's no question about it. Yeah, it's going to be kosher. And he's kept kosher now for 16 months. But now McDonald's has a 2-for-1 sale till the end of the week. 2-for-1 bacon cheeseburgers. A little voice inside his head says, it's wonderful to keep kosher. It's very important to keep kosher next week after the sale. But in the meantime, take advantage of it. It's been 16 months since you had a cheeseburger. So, heart heavy and wallet open, he goes to the McDonald's, puts down his money, and he has 2 bacon cheeseburgers. Now I want to ask, what does the Kodesh Baruch Hu want here? What does he want to happen? Does he want Reuven Schwartz to eat a bacon cheeseburger? Well, then why did he give all the laws of keeping kashrus? Certainly doesn't want that. But then, if he wants that he shouldn't eat the cheeseburger, no one can fight against God. No one's strong enough to disobey the Creator. If the Creator wants something, it's done. His will creates reality. There's no way to stop his will from creating reality. So, then, how does he manage it? How does he manage eating the bacon cheeseburger since it's the Kodesh Baruch Hu's will that he not eat the bacon cheeseburger? How does that happen? Okay, now let's try to introduce the principle that's at work here. Let's go back to the tshuva case. Maybe the tshuva case is the easiest case. Punishment is directed at someone who doesn't do tshuva. As long as the person has committed the crime and has not yet done tshuva, in the condition of not having done tshuva, the punishment applies to him. When a person does tshuva, he changes his condition, and his condition comes under the rule of a different law. There are 2 laws. Laws are dependent upon circumstances. Laws say, in these circumstances, this and this should happen. If you have the power to change the circumstances, listen carefully now, you change which law applies. All the laws are on the books. The laws aren't changing. The outcome is changing because there's one law for one set of circumstances and a different law for a different set of circumstances. I'm using the metaphor of the law now. Let's go back to the expression that we started with, God's will. God's will is often conditional. God's will has an if-then structure. So with respect to punishment, God's constant, fixed, unchanging will is, if a crime is committed, then it gets punished, and if the person who committed the crime does tshuva, then it doesn't get punished. That's his constant, unchanging will. Does he change his mind? Not at all. Just have to take into account that his mind is conditional. His mind takes into account the conditions that people are under, and when a person has the power to change the conditions, so then the outcome will be different without a change in God's mind. Okay, now let's go to Reuven Schwartz. Well, let's define very carefully what the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. Does Kodesh Baruch Hu want Reuven Schwartz to eat the cheeseburger? He certainly does not. He gave laws against eating cheeseburgers, and he promised punishments for people who do eat cheeseburgers. He definitely doesn't want them. He has no will that they should eat cheeseburgers. Does Kodesh Baruch Hu want that Reuben Schwartz should not eat the cheeseburger, there you've got to be careful. The answer is sort of. Sort of. Here's what Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. Kodesh Baruch Hu wants Reuben Schwartz to freely choose not to eat cheeseburgers. He wants him to freely choose not to eat cheeseburgers. Not that he don't want him not to eat cheeseburgers. He can simply withdraw his life and let him die. He won't eat cheeseburgers. He has the power to do that. That's not what he wants. What he wants is that Reuben should make a certain free choice. Now, it can't be that Kodesh Baruch Hu wants him to make a free choice and satisfies that will to make a free choice by forcing him to do what he wants him to do. Because then he won't get what he wants. What he wants is that he should do it freely. If he forces him, he's not getting his will that he should do it for the free choice doesn't get fulfilled. So here's a will which cannot create the reality. By the definition of what the will is aimed at, it's a reality that can't be created by that will. It's a reality that can only be created, in this case, by the person by exercising his free will. So now, let's go back and ask what Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. Well, for one thing, he wants him to freely choose to not eat the cheeseburger. And now, if he freely chooses to eat the cheeseburger, what does he want? Well, he may very well want that he has the ability to carry it out. Because, number one, he wants to support free will. And number two, life is a learning process, and as everyone knows, you learn both from your successes and your failures. Failures have consequences. So Kodesh Baruch Hu set up the world in such a way that many times, not always, but many times, when a person chooses to do the wrong thing, Kodesh Baruch Hu wants him to be able to carry it out. So, Kodesh Baruch Hu gets what he wants. He gets what he wills, but the will, if it's for a free choice, depends upon what the person does. And the subsequent will is, if he exercises a free choice to eat the cheeseburger, he should be able to do that, and he's able to do it, and he does do it. Here's again the same structure. What a Kodesh Baruch Hu wants depends. It's not sort of absolute, one-dimensional, and universal. It depends. It depends upon what free choice the person makes. And that's the same structure as we had in the case of tshuva. So, hoping that the structure is clear now, let's go back to the question about prayer. And here, by the way, it's Yosef Albo and Sefer Ikrim who raised the question about prayer. It's slightly different form, but it's his question. And now, I can give you the form of the answer. It's just that the form of the answer then opens up a whole subject. The form of the answer is this. It may be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will for the person who's asking, who's petitioning, who's making a request, is this, that if he doesn't make the request, then he doesn't get it. And if he does make the request, he does get it. That's his will. His will is dependent upon the circumstances. It's like a fork in the road. So, since HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, which doesn't change, because it's a double conditional will. The will doesn't change, but the outcome changes. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants that if he doesn't ask, he won't get, and if he does ask, he will get. So when Reuben decides to ask, I said it wrong? He wants that if Reuben asks for it, he'll get it, and if he doesn't ask for it, he won't get it. Yeah. So when he asks, he moves himself to another clause in the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. So if we're asking about whether when you ask for something from the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're trying to change his mind, the answer is no. His mind is fixed on, if you don't ask, you don't get, and if you do ask, you do get. That's his mind. That doesn't change. Yeah. When you make the decision to ask, you just push yourself into the other category. Okay. That's the idea that the Albo says, that you're a different person when you ask, and the judgment that you shouldn't have it applied to you in the old condition, and now having asked, you're in a new condition, and in the new condition, the judgment that you should get, it does apply. Just like with tshuva and not being punished, just like with Reuben Schwartz who eats the bacon cheeseburger. Yeah.
I heard an idea, and I think it comes through in the Gemara, that you can actually move, if there's a someone's got a shidduch that's been decreed, then you can actually move the if-then in your favor by asking, to if there's someone that you would like to have as a shidduch, by, asking and requesting, you can actually then change that, decree, so to speak. I don't know if that's the way to describe it, but that idea of asking can change the outcome that it's tending towards.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about asking the first stuff. And Soto talks about this, and other Gemaras talk about this, that when we talk about, let's say, the Bashert, the destined partner, that is also a conditional judgment. Some people bring it from the fact that during the 3 weeks when we're mourning for the temple, 3 weeks in the summer, we don't make voluntary celebrations except for one, and that's an engagement. In fact, an engagement can be made on Tisha B'Av. And the Gemara's reasoning is that you both agree now, take it now. Because afterwards, you might not both agree. Which it seems to imply that it doesn't have to happen.
Yeah.
So, and the fact is, the Rambam in the Tshuva brings it from an explicit verse in the Torah. There cannot be such a thing as a decree that so-and-so will marry so-and-so. It cannot be. Now, you say that, you all know it. I mean, and people who have been through Chumash know it very well. It's just that you need a Rambam to point it out. What about the people who are told to go back from war? There are 3 categories, plus a 4th category of people who are afraid. One of them is someone who has, betrothed, Kiddushin without Nisuin, for the aficionados. There's a marriage to be conducted, and it has not yet been actually fulfilled. And the Pasuk says explicitly, he should go home and conduct the marriage, finish the marriage. Because if not, maybe he'll die in the war and somebody else will marry her. Really? Maybe? How could that be? If there's someone who's decreed, so if he's the one who's decreed, he'll survive the war and go to, because he hasn't married her yet. And if he's not the one who's decreed, then even if he goes back, it won't work, because he's not the one who's decreed. How can the decision to send him back from the war determine the outcome of whether he marries her or not? Clearly, the decree that he marries her is conditional on certain features that will take place. And in this case, the Torah is saying, it may very well be that this is the feature which you have in your control, which will change the outcome. But not by changing the decree, because the decree is conditional. It depends upon the conditions. So this is a general, and this now is a lever for understanding many features of the Torah, both in Psukim and in Rishonim and Achronim. If you keep in mind that the Kodesh Baruch Hu's judgments are very often conditional, and they don't change, but they are conditional. It's sort of like this. If a person's new to, let's say, football, and he sees the game going, and he notices that each time it starts over, the teams don't do the same thing. They do different things. One time the quarterback tries to run the ball up the middle, and another time he takes a pass, sometimes it's a handoff, and he says, these poor people, they can't keep their minds straight. They keep changing their minds, they keep changing their orientation. Why don't they, just, something wrong with them mentally? They keep, the answer is, not at all. The quarterback has 16 different plays in his mind. They're all worked out, they're all ready to go, and he has 16 sets of circumstances. Use play 5 when these and these circumstances, and use play 17 with those 7 when those circumstances, and that plan never changes. The plan is a fixed plan, and all the players know the plan. It's just that the circumstances change, so different parts of the plan come into action. But he's not changing his mind. The plan is made to be conditional in that way. So, when you come back to the question about prayer, when you're not asking to change God's mind. No, it may be that, as we said, his fixed mind about the person is, if he doesn't ask, he won't get. If he does ask, he will get. Because asking changes the circumstances. Now the question will be, how could that happen? What is the nature of a Kodesh Baruch Hu's judgment and evaluations that The difference is made by whether you ask or not. Why should asking be the difference? That's not obvious. Formally, it works. Make a Kodesh Baruch Hu's will into a fork, and you have no problem with changing his mind. But now, in terms of the content, it's very hard to explain why just asking should make the difference. So the challenge vis-a-vis prayer is to see why petition would make the difference. Where, in so to speak, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's value structure and valuation structure and management structure, asking is such an important matter to change to go from one outcome to another outcome. And what you need here is this. It's very interesting. Various times in the Chumash, Kodesh Baruch Hu announces a decree, and Abraham pleads on behalf of stone, and it changes. Or it looks like it changes. The decree is a different decree. And Moses after the golden calf, and Moses after the sin of the spies. Kodesh Baruch Hu announces disaster, and Moses raises objections to the decree, and then Kodesh Baruch Hu says, okay, I'll do something else. So the same structure applies there as well. It means the decree for Sodom without Abraham's plea is X, and the decree for Sodom with Abraham's plea is Y, because the situation is different. Now Abraham's plea is on record. It's a different part of history. So now the situation is different. Same thing with the golden calf and with the spies. Without Moses' objections, the decree would be this, and with the objections, it's a different decree. And now you learn two very important things from this. Number one, you learn how important our pleading is, our reaction to a Kodesh Baruch Hu is, that it changes the part of a Kodesh Baruch Hu's will that applies. And if you look at the details, you learn what a Kodesh Baruch Hu cares about. When Moshe Rabbeinu says after the golden calf, here are 3 reasons why the Jewish people shouldn't be wiped out, Kodesh Baruch Hu said, okay, now that you've put those 3 things on record, the decree is that they won't be wiped out. When it comes to the spies, Moshe Rabbeinu also has 3 reasons why the people shouldn't be wiped out. And Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Salachti kidvarecha. And the spelling of Dvarecha there in the Hebrew is without a yud. So Dvarecha is singular. And Chazal say, Moses presented 3 reasons, but only one was relevant. The other 2 weren't accepted. You learn a lot. The one that was accepted is what will the Goyim say. Wow. What will the Goyim say must be very important. And then you learn how careful you should be about what the Goyim will say, because Baruch Hu cares about it that much. Okay. So now what we need here, for the sake of prayer, is to understand what is it that Keviyachol Kodesh Baruch Hu cares about so much that if I make a request, that could make the difference between getting it or not getting it. Why is my making the request putting me in such a different category that he cares about that would make the difference between getting and not getting what I'm asking for? And there are 3 answers to this question, depending upon the type of request that you're making. I divide the requests into 3 categories. I can't testify that there wouldn't be other ways of doing it and other ways of drawing the conclusions, but this is the way I do it. Let's start with a petition that is totally selfish. Dear God, please give me a 2024 Porsche. Why? I like nice cars, leather seats, quadraphonic sounds, climate control, self-driving, the works, sunroof, the works, because I like nice cars. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to have a good time. In particular, showing up to the neighbors, I'm going to have a good time. That's what I'm going to do with it. Now I ask you, is there any spiritual value in that request? I'm burlesquing it to make it as dark as possible. And the answer is, yes, there is. Yes, there is. Because I'm asking God. Why am I asking God? Because He has the keys to the warehouse. He's running the show. He's going to make it happen. There are a lot of people who want a 2024 Porsche, and they don't ask God. So, maybe I'm in a pretty small minority. I'm asking God for it, right? I'm expressing a very important orientation, a very important belief. And Kodesh Baruch Hu may very well say, listen, he believes in me, he knows I'm running the world, I want to reinforce that. And if every time he asks I simply ignore him, at a certain point, his whole attitude could go into extinction. So that could be reason enough to sometimes give what's asked for because it was asked for. If it wasn't asked for, that reason of reinforcing the attitude that Kodesh Baruch Hu is running the world wouldn't apply. And since it wouldn't apply, it wouldn't have the same justification of giving it to him. So that's the first case, and that's sort of a paradigm to how the cases work. And the second case is where the petition is on a much higher level. I think that it's a level we could strive for. It's not out of reach. And that is to define myself as a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what I am. That defines my goals, my hopes, my longings. And therefore, when I ask for something from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm asking for a means by which I can serve him better. Because that's all I want. That's all I'm trying to accomplish in life, is to serve him. Which would mean, to make it vivid, you're standing before the throne of glory, before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you're saying, please give me A, please give me B, please give me C. And you imagine the attending angel tapping you on the shoulder when you get to R and says, why do you want R? Reason! What's your reason? Have a reason ready. And the reason ought to be, if I have R, I can do this kind of service with Kodesh Baruch Hu, and if I don't have R, I can't. I'm asking for R so that I can serve Kodesh Baruch Hu in this way. That should be the reason that's available for everything that you ask for. You're asking as a servant of Kodesh Baruch Hu. This concept of petition, I think, has two explanations of why Kodesh Baruch Hu would be interested in it, and therefore will have, so to speak, a significant part to play in the structure of his conditional wills. If you don't ask, you don't get. If you do ask, you do get. And this idea of petition connects with a number of other Jewish ideas, so it becomes an extremely rich idea. So let's start with the first. Why would the Kodesh Baruch Hu be interested in petition of this kind, so that on some occasions he would say, if you ask this way, you get it. If you don't, you don't. Well, for at least two reasons. One is, since you are expressing yourself as a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to reinforce that. Because if you understand the world correctly, that's what you should be. And this person does understand it correctly. And that's what's going into his petition. So again, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu never answers petition positively, that is not being reinforced, and it can go to extinction, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want that. This is one explanation for why in Shachris and in Ma'ariv, where you have Kriya Shema, and then the Shemona Esrei, and you're not allowed to interrupt, is because in the Shema, you define yourself as the Kodesh Baruch Hu servant, you have Kabbalah Malchus Shamayim, you see upon yourself the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. That's the right mental set to use to go into asking for, making petitions for Kodesh Baruch Hu. Since I'm a servant, I'm only going to ask for that which will enable me to serve him better. That's one. And the other is this. There's a Gemara, which I think this gives perspective on. I struggled with this for years. Kodesh Baruch Hu Kodesh Baruch Hu desires the prayers of tzaddikim. And that's why the patriarchs and matriarchs were childless, infertile, years, decades. So I thought, wow, if you have had any contact with infertility, it's excruciating. The worries and the self-doubt and the deprivation of not having children, because Baruch Hu wants their prayers. He enjoys the fact that they're despairing inside and so forth and so on. Well, why would he want that? But then I remembered, I focused on the fact that it says he wants the prayers of tzaddikim. That means this would apply only to really high people. For other people it wouldn't apply. Well, why? Well, one of the things you do when you ask for something is you prepare yourself for how you'll use it when you get it. If I ask and ask and ask, and I ask with the belief that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world, and I want it only because I want to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when I get it, I will be full of gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He gave me this means to be able to serve Him, and I'm much more likely to use it correctly to serve Him than to misuse it. Because there's no guarantee when you get a gift you use it correctly. You know that very well. So, then, and this is what tzaddikim do with their prayer. When they ask, and they ask sincerely and with the belief and trust that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world, it strengthens them and enables them to prepare themselves to use what they're asking for in the appropriate way. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu will deprive them of it for a period of time, so that the process of prayer will strengthen them in that way, so they'll be better able to succeed in serving Him with what they're asking for. So here are two reasons why HaKadosh Baruch Hu HaKadosh Baruch Hu will value this type of petition, and that means often the decree for the person will be, if he doesn't ask, he won't get, because you don't have this petition to reinforce. And if he does ask, when you do have this condition to reinforce, then there becomes an increased value in giving it to him, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give it to him. Yeah.
Just want to make sure I understand this last point correctly. Do the tzaddikim become more introspective in how to use the thing that they're praying for, and that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants them to do?
I wouldn't say introspective. It's just that you prepare yourself psychologically. You prepare yourself psychologically to use it for that purpose. You know, right. In other words, I think if you believe in it and you understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is answering your prayer, so then you're invested a lot psychologically in it.
So you're meant to
and
you're
meant to prepare yourself.
It's not like you're just stumbling into a marriage or stumbling into having a child, but you're thinking about it all the time and always meditating on it, and you know that you really want it because you're constantly asking.
That's right. You know, it's similar to, I'll take a question in a second. It's similar to a report that went around a while ago. A couple has a child, and they're going to make a bris as a boy, and they go to the rabbi to ask, should they make a fleshik suda, a meat meal, which is more expensive than, you know. So the rabbi asks, how long are you married? And they said, 18 months. Well, imagine you were married for 10 years without a child. And then you had your first child. That's a boy. And you're going to make a bris. Would you have a fleshik meal? Of course. After 10 years? Wow. That would be a gigantic simcha. Yeah, because Baruch Hu gave you a child. And He didn't make you wait 10 years. And you think it's less than that? It's less than that? It's more than that. Okay. Now you have a perspective of what the Kodesh Baruch Hu is giving you, right? And you treat it in a different way. Yeah. So that's the idea of prayer is to give you a perspective of what the Kodesh Baruch Hu is giving you. Yeah.
The question is like the constant of time applies. So like you say we ask God like for certain sin because we were able to use them in order to serve Him. But God knows whether or not we will use them to serve these tools to serve Him. So, and if He knows already, like whether or not, like why don't give it already? And if He knows we need it, like we could serve Him, like why do we need to ask? If God already knows it, that's what we desire.
Why do you assume that whether I will serve Him with it is independent of whether I ask? Maybe I will only use it to serve Him because I asked. Because asking makes me stronger to use it in the appropriate way. This question is an old question. We used to put this on qualifying exams for graduate students of philosophy. If they got this wrong, we told them to go drive a bus and give up philosophy. Why should I take medicine? Either I'm going to recover, or I'm not going to recover. If I'm going to recover, I don't need the medicine. And if I'm not going to recover, then the medicine isn't doing me any good. So don't take any medicine. No, whether you recover or not depends upon whether you take the medicine. So it's very important to take the medicine. Not that it's given independent of what you do. What you do can be the thing that makes it happen. Okay, this is standard logic problem. Okay. So now I want to point out some connections that this idea has with other aspects of what we do, because I think it's a very deep idea. First of all, there's a story. I don't remember who it was, but one of the great rabbis of Europe, I guess it was about 1880, on Rosh Hashanah, told his congregation that it was Rosh Hashanah. He said, this year on Sukkot, when you say Hallel, when you come to honor Hashem, if you have in mind what you want, I promise the Kodesh Baruch Hu will give it to you. Wow. Promise from the Rav. So when that Sukkot came, and they came to honor Hashem, the roof was shaky. A few months later, two of the great disciples of the Rav were talking. One said to the other, I have some terrible thing to confess. I'm sure that when I said honor Hashem, I had in mind what I needed, I didn't get anything. And the other one said, me neither, I didn't get anything either. Let's go ask. So they went to ask, and as the story has it, they didn't ask the Rav himself, they asked his Misharis, his second in command, his secretary. And the secretary said, you were sure that you had in mind when you said honor Hashem? Which pasuk is that? He says, honor Hashem Hoshiana, honor Hashem Hatzlichana. Oh, he said, sorry, wrong pasuk. Actually, it says honor Hashem 3 times in Hal. And the Rav didn't mean that one. He meant honor Hashem Kani Avdecha. Please Hashem, because I'm your servant. Oh. Let's think of the sentiment behind the two of them. Please Hashem, save me. Please Hashem, make me successful. Why? Why? Because I'm drowning. Why? Because, it's nicer to be successful than fail. I want to succeed. So please save me, right? Those psukim could be said from a totally selfish point of view. But Ana Hashem ki ani avdecha, please Hashem, because I'm your servant, is said because I'm your servant. And that's why I'm asking. And if you had it in mind there, the Rav promised that you would be answered. Because you're asking as a servant. And it's that asking that counts. We know that the rabbis set up a structure whereby the prayers imitate the sacrifices. So there are 2 daily sacrifices, plus in the evening when you burn up the extra parts that need to be burned up. And there are 3 daily prayers. On Shabbos is an extra sacrifice, so then Shabbos is an extra prayer. The times of the prayers are identical with the times of the sacrifices. The rabbis made and the Gemara's word is tefillos keneged karbanos tiknu. The tefillos were made to correspond with the sacrifices. Why did they do that? Where did they get the idea from? So, those who don't know Jewish sources will tell you, well, you see, the first temple was destroyed, and there weren't any sacrifices anymore, so they made up these prayers to make up for the missing sacrifices. Well, that's dead wrong. First of all, this structure was made at the beginning of the second temple and went simultaneously with the second temple for 420 years. So it wasn't to fill in for the missing sacrifices. It accompanied the existing sacrifices. That's number one. And number two, there are verses that talk about this. There's a famous verse in Isaiah. It's famous because it became a famous song. I'll bring them into my holy mountain, my mountain of holiness. And I will cause them to rejoice in my house of prayer. My house of prayer. Their sacrifices will be for willing acceptance on the altar. Ki Beisi, based filo, yikarei l'chol amim, because my house will be called a house of prayer for all the peoples. Well, if you're awake and critical, you think, let's see how this verse is structured. It's house of prayer at the beginning, house of prayer at the end, and in the middle there are sacrifices. How does that fit together? This isn't the rabbis making a rabbinical rule 100 years later. This is Isaiah talking. Obviously, Isaiah saw some kind of identity between the place where sacrifices are offered and the title of house of prayer. But then it's even earlier than that. If you take a look in the first book of Kings, when King Solomon finishes building the temple, and he gives a several chapter long dedication of the temple, and he asks the Kodesh Baruch Hu to be connected to what goes on in the building he has built, the only activity he mentions is prayer. If you had only Solomon's dedication, you wouldn't have a clue that there were sacrifices there. It's not even mentioned. So something very deep is going on here. So I think the idea is that prayer and sacrifices are both expressions of a single theme. And this is an uphill battle because a superficial look at it would seem to have them expressing opposite themes. I'm not going to the details and the subtlety and all the rest, but in broad, gross, simplistic terms, in sacrifices, we're giving things to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in prayer, we're asking Him to give us things. So the direction of flow is different. Opposite. Why would you think they express the same theme? Why would you think you could integrate them into a single institution? But the answer is that when you are praying, you are offering yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because the things you're asking for as a servant. You're asking for tools to serve the master better. And the real flow there is from the servant to the master, not the other way around. I'll give you two examples of this. You're a soldier on the front lines, shooting bullets at the enemy, and you're running out of bullets. So you radio back to the base. Bullets! 30 seconds, they'll be there. Watch the helicopter. The helicopter's buzzing over, the helicopter drop, and the boxes land right in front of it. Thanks, guys! Right? Now, who's giving who here? Who's receiving who here? Well, and what's the direction of flow? Well, the soldier got the bullets, didn't he? Yeah, he got the bullets to shoot at the enemy to win the war for the army. So really, it's not that the soldier got a gift from the army. He's using this to fight for the army. The flow here is from soldier to army, not from army to soldier. It's just that in order to get the flow from the soldier, you have to give him bullets so he can do his job. Guy's working for IBM, and one of his jobs is to simulate three-dimensionally the airflow of the air past the wings of a newly designed aircraft. It's a very, very complex calculation, and he has a 2-year-old Tesla's chip. So he says to his superior, I'm doing this, but the computer keeps crashing, and some of the simulations don't work, and so I have to leave out some of the variables. Give me a new chip. And goes up, and it comes back into 2 weeks. I talk to the upper reps. Monday morning, you'll have a new chip. Now, what's the flow here? The flow is from the worker who's making the simulations to IBM, who are going to use the simulation to make money. Well, but they gave him the chip. Sure, they gave him the chip to make better simulations, so they'll make better money. Right? When the worker says, "Give me a better chip," he's not asking for a raise in salary. He's not asking for days off to spend with his children. He's asking for a better tool with which to do the job that IBM needs done. Okay, so if that's the case, the same thing's true with respect to prayer. If you go into prayer with the attitude, and I'm asking for ways to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu better, that what's being expressed is, I'm your servant. I belong to you. I've dedicated myself for doing the best job for you that I can possibly do. So in prayer, the flow is from us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in sacrifices, the flow is from us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the same flow. So what Chazal are saying, by setting up the prayers to correspond to the sacrifices, is this. Before we have organized prayer, which is the beginning of the Second Temple, does every Jew participate in the flow from the people to God? Sure, because in Adar, I paid my dues. I paid my half shekel once a year. I paid. I sent my coin into the temple. Listen, I'm there. So on July 16th, when I sleep till noon, but the Kohanim are there, the priests are there, and they're up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're offering the sacrifice, and my name's written down in the sacrifice, so I'm there. Says Chazal, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. We want the conscious participation of the whole Am simultaneously with the prayer. Some actually in the temple. There were some who were saying verses in the temple there at the time, and everywhere else. Jews are praying at the same time the sacrifice is being offered. So it's an integrated national institution. If you have the idea of petition as asking for means to serve him, you can see how sacrifices and prayer are a single integrated institution. Yeah.
There's actually interesting in Tilim Kaf, the commentary on Pasuk 5, also gives an explanation to that point where it says that it can also be understood as a promise. God will fulfill all of our requests when we're following God's ways, and thus merit of salvation. We can be assured that He will fulfill all of our desires, because at that point they'll all be pure and only for the purpose of serving God. So similar to the example of the bullets, once we are using the bullets to serve Hashem, then we can be assured that we'll get the bullets, because we're not going to go shoot friendly fire, so to speak.
I think that's right, and I think that that's one way to understand when we lost the temples. There are those who say that the loss of the temples was protection, because the potential has great power, and if used inappropriately, it can be very destructive. And in the very same spirit in which you take the matches away from your 4-year-old, because he doesn't know what he can do with those matches, so because Baruch Hu said you have the temple and you're using it in the wrong way, you can do terribly destructive things, and therefore I'm protecting you by taking it away from you. So very similar sentiment. At any rate, this is the second level of petition, and you can see that it has, there are many more connections. By the way, this is a chapter in my book, The Informed Soul, so all this argumentation is there, and the sources are there. We have only a little time. I'll mention the third level for the sake of completeness. The second level I think we can all strive for, because I think we acknowledge the idea that we're supposed to be servants of Kodesh Baruch Hu, and as you grow and as you work on yourself, you become more and more integrated into that identity. I think we can all strive for this level. The third level is very exalted. I'm only mentioning it to fill out the philosophical picture. The second level is a level, I'm going to describe it in very abstract terms now so that I can introduce the third level. Second level, what's the picture of the world? What's going on? Well, I'm here because Baruch Hu's there. I've dedicated myself to serving him. I define myself as his servant. Listen carefully. I define myself as his servant, but I am I, and I have an identity, and I have a future, I have a life, I'm doing something, and what I'm doing is, wait for it, it's coming, what I'm doing is serving him. But I'm in the picture, he's in the picture, and the question is, how are we related? The third level is a level where only Kodesh Baruch Hu is in the picture. And the things that Kodesh Baruch Hu cares about. But they get into the picture only because the Kodesh Baruch Hu cares about them. Only Kodesh Baruch Hu matters, and I matter insofar as he cares about me. That's my mattering. I have no independent identity, I have no title, I have no stature. The highest possible description of a human being that you can have is what Moshe Rabbeinu got, Eved Hashem, servant of Kodesh Baruch Hu. That was the highest possible attainment. So I'll give you an example now of how this looks, both in a particular case which happened to a certain friend of mine when I was a kid, and what it says in the Nefesh HaChaim. This friend of mine, he was an only child, and his father used to take him every Sunday on some kind of adventure. He was 8 years old. And I knew him, and he asked me once on Saturday if I would be available to play with him on Sunday. I'm sorry, I asked him whether and he said to me, I would love to play with you, I enjoy playing with you, but my father thinks he has to take me out on an adventure on Sundays, and I hate to disappoint him. Now let's think about that. This friend of mine enjoyed the adventures. He enjoyed them. In this case, he would have preferred to play with me, but he didn't want to disappoint his father. If he's going on the adventure with his father, he'll enjoy it. Why is he enjoying it? He's enjoying it because he doesn't want to disappoint his father.
Yeah.
His focus is on his father and his father's disappointment, and his enjoyment is because he doesn't want to disappoint his father. I mean, his father takes him out so that he'll enjoy it. That's why he's doing it, right? So he'll enjoy it, but he's enjoying it because his father wants it. The Mefesh Chaim says, is it appropriate to serve the Kodesh Baruch Hu to get into the world to come? So everybody knows. Rambam says no. It shouldn't be selfish at all. It should be only for the sake of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, right? The Mefesh Chaim says, but you could twist it around so you get both, and that is, and the Mesilas Yesharim in the beginning really says this on the first page, right? It says, sure, I want to get into the world to come. I'm serving Kodesh Baruch Hu to get into the world to come. You know why I'm serving him to get into the world to come? Because that's where he wants me to be. He wants me to be there. And I want what he wants. I want him to have what he wants. So since he wants it for me, that's why I want it for myself. I'll enjoy it, believe me. It's a supreme enjoyment. But I want the enjoyment because he wants me to have it. So now, let's take a look at the petitions we make. The verse says, Imo Anochi B'tzara. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I'm with you in pain. So when we're in pain, something about Kodesh Baruch Hu is in pain. The Shekhinah is in pain. Okay, God doesn't change and he's not affected by what we do. Yeah, we know all of that. Fine. Okay. It's a complex story. The verses say this. So the person says, please, Kodesh Baruch Hu, give me enough money to pay rent, because when I don't pay rent, I'm worried. And when I'm worried, I'm in pain. And when I'm in pain, the Shekhinah is in pain. And I don't want the Shekhinah to be in pain. That's why I'm asking you to take away my pain, because the Shekhinah is in pain. I'll give you a vivid example of what this means. Let's suppose, back to Reuven Schwartz, who loves bacon cheeseburgers. But it turns out that in this particular case, the bacon cheeseburger is wired to an 18-month-old child. And I got plenty of time. And every bite of the bacon cheeseburger is going to cause an electrical charge to go through the body of the 18-month-old child, and the child is going to scream, and Reuven will hear the screaming. You think he'll be able to eat the cheeseburger? I don't think so. He couldn't possibly cause pain to an innocent infant by eating the cheeseburger. Now that's the way this other person feels about the Shekhinah. I can't cause pain to the Shekhinah. I can't do that. Here's where me and my service and my identity don't play any role at all. It's just that I'm linked up to a Kodesh Baruch Hu in a certain way that what I do has an effect, and the effect there determines the entire thing. So when I'm asking, I'm only asking for the sake of what it will do for the Shekhinah, let's say. Right? Now that's a very, very high exalted level. I'm just putting it in because there are really three levels of relationship to Kodesh Baruch Hu. The first level, which is totally selfish in purpose, but it acknowledges that the Kodesh Baruch Hu is running the world. The second level dedicates that all my efforts are to serve Kodesh Baruch Hu, but I am I, and my efforts are my efforts, and my success in serving Kodesh Baruch Hu is my success, and my efforts are aimed at. But then there's two. There's me and there's Kodesh Baruch Hu. We stand in a certain relationship. I have my identity and my plans, my projects, which happen to be to serve Kodesh Baruch Hu. Yes, right. And the third level, I come in just because, I say I'm a flip of Kodesh Baruch Hu's finger. I come in because he's concerned with me. Not that I'm concerned with the greatest thing I can do, and just so happens that serving Kodesh Baruch Hu is the greatest thing I can do, and having a noble spirit, I dedicate myself to the highest light that I could have. How many times do I have to say I the whole way through? The other way, no. What's going on up there? That's what motivates you. What's there, not what I will be. According to Rav Dessler, this was the test of Adam Arishan in Gan Eden, Rav Dester has a series of essays on the Parshios, not all of them, but many, especially in Bereshis. And I would heartily recommend that and everything else he wrote, of course, but his essay on the first section of Bereshis with the test of Adon Rishon has this theme also. What undid Adon Rishon was the sense of his own spiritual accomplishment. That was his test, to expunge, to rid himself of the I, and have only a Kodesh Baruch Hu in mind, and he failed. Anyway, that's the third level. These are the three levels of petition. Yeah, you wanted to ask?
No, you answered.
Okay. Okay. So that's the idea. Kodesh Baruch Hu. Oh, by the way, yes, I forgot to answer the very first thing. What does it mean about the people who are going to the flood? And he says it's translated, "I regret that I made them," and regret definitely will be a change of mind. So when Kodesh Baruch Hu tells Samuel the prophet, go to King Saul and tell him he's finished. He's not going to be king anymore. So Samuel goes and he says roughly the following words. I'm not quoting it word for word, but he says, "You're finished. Kodesh Baruch Hu is nicham that he made you king, and he's going to give it to somebody else, which turned out to be Dovid HaMelech. And don't try to change that he's giving it to that person, because Kodesh Baruch Hu is never nicham. Never nicham. He's not flesh and blood. That's nicham. He's never nicham." Now, 3 sentences before, King Samuel says he was nicham on your kingdom, and now he says he's not nicham. He doesn't. He's not a basar v'dam. He's not a flesh and blood to be nicham. I mean, come on, it's a steerer within 6 lines. So the answer that's given, and what Rashi says on that pasuk in Bereshis, the answer he says is this: there are 2 types of decisions that you make. One is what end to achieve, to set yourself for. The other is the means that you're going to use to achieve the end. The choice of end doesn't change. Dovid has to be king. The kingdom has to come from Yehuda. It can't come from Binyamin. It can't come from a different tribe, right? But there's a question of means. And which means you use, listen carefully, depends upon the circumstances. So, under certain circumstances, this means is appropriate. And when the circumstances change, a different means is appropriate. And that's not a change of mind, and it's certainly not regret. When I have made the first reality, I made it under those conditions, and that was the right thing to do under those conditions. And when that doesn't succeed, then the conditions change, so then there's another reality that's appropriate, because I'm shifting from means to means as circumstances shift. Saul had a certain role in setting up the conditions for Dovid, and he could have continued to play a role. Some say he could have been the governor of a province. He was a ruling character that could have played out to the end of his life. He made a mistake, and he was removed from rulership, because he's changed, and then the circumstances require something else. Same thing's true with the generation of the flood. There was an opportunity for them, and as long as there was an opportunity, we're dealing with it, but then circumstances changed, and they were no longer relevant to the continuing development, and therefore a different means was chosen. There's no such thing, no regret, and there's no changing of mind. There's simply a set of principles. Each principle has its, what we call trigger conditions, and when the conditions change, different principles get triggered. Yeah.
And would another example of that be with Esther, when the Jewish people are going to be saved, but she gets the opportunity whether to be the means to be a catalyst in them being saved or not?
That's a very nice thought. That's a very nice thought. I think that's probably right. I didn't think of that connection, but that's a very nice thought. They're going to be saved. That's what Mordechai says. Because he saw their reaction when he announced the decree. And everybody was crying, and everybody had sackcloth on them. Everybody was davening. So he knew there was going to be a salvation. Was it going to be through her or somebody else? Some very nice thought. Very nice thought. Congratulations. Yeah. Okay.